today's episode of Vice Versa, we're talking about GM releasing the last of the gasoline V series, Elon Musk getting the CEO of Robinhood to spill the beans about GameStop, VW's ID.6 electric SUV leaks, and much more. And as usual, I'm joined by Ricky Roy. How you doing, Ricky?
Good, Matt. It's been a kind of a crazy week. I had a little issue with my YouTube video while I was editing, but yeah, not bad. How about you? What'd you do this week?
Usual stuff. I'm just stuck at home releasing videos. Just put a video out this week about the vertical gardening, vertical farming. It's really kind of a fascinating thing that they can do right now with that kind of stuff. And it's like, I really hope that kind of catches on more.
Very good video. I haven't seen it yet, but I have a bookmark. I'll check it out. My video this week was on the Apple car and what it means. Are they going to make it? It's kind of a bizarre story, so I wanted to kind of give my 2 cents on it. So yeah, good week. Should we jump right into it?
Let's jump right into it.
Okay, this one is, I was reading, I'm a big car person. I don't know how many people know that, but huge car guy before EVs, and now I'm all about EVs. But Cadillac is potentially creating the last of their very special black wings, which is a very special trim of their V series, which is like the BMW AMG kind of equivalent. So what what's interesting here is we are looking at the end of an era. So there was a time when, 400 horsepower and the CT5, 600 horsepower, those numbers sounded amazing, like beyond belief. Now it's kind of a yawn. It's like, okay, boring. My $50,000 very economy reliable Model 3 performance is putting out 500 horsepower. So the craziness of runaway performance numbers. And I want to quickly just read a paragraph. So here's a paragraph I thought was really apropos. And even in their case, the appeal will be like that of an analog watch, objects of mechanical fascination. On that front, the new Blackwing looks good. When you bring your 2022 CT5 Blackwing in to a 2040 car and coffee, you'll be talking about its titanium intake valves and its 4-lobe Eaton supercharger and its aluminum cylinder heads. So it's kind of funny, but we're looking at cars that 30 years from now are going to be thought of as antiques and kind of the last of their lineage. This is especially interesting because if you're going to build a performance car going forward, it cannot have a gasoline engine. It'll just be too horridly slow. It just won't work. So welcome to the final iteration, the final chapter of the gasoline car. That's kind of the way I look at this. And we've had some nice ones. We've had some fast ones. They're just on their last leg. So that car, by the way, has a manual transmission. So for anybody who loves gas cars or manual transmissions, go out and get one of these. This will be the last of its kind. Yeah,
when I read this, when you put this article in and I read it, the first thing that popped in my head was smoke them if you got them, because it's like they're gonna be going away. They're gonna become antiques and collector's items. It's kind of weird to start wrapping my head around that. Like we're starting to see that happening now. You read something from it. There was another passage that jumped out at me that I earmarked that I wanted to read, which was, but if we're on the verge of seeing 1,000 horsepower trucks right now, ponder where we'll be once the horsepower race is decoupled from fuel economy and emissions considerations, from the constrictions of intake and exhaust and fuel flow, from the need to keep hundreds of precisely arranged components from flying apart. The game is going to change in a way that we're not yet calibrated to understand. I thought that was this article was so well written. I loved so much of this article. And to me, that just summarized the whole thing so well to me. It's like, it's when you think about the complexity of internal combustion engines, it's kind of a miracle of engineering, what we're able to do and how much power we can harness from that. But at the same time, it seems so antiquated with what we can do with electric motors, and they just smoke these cars again and again. And the article just brought up how Pikes Peak, the record holder for Pikes Peak is an EV now from VW. It's like there's just so many of these records that are being broken by EV after EV after EV. It just illustrates it's actually for that kind of thing, it's the better technology, but it still has to catch up on other aspects like charging infrastructure and the ease of use. There's still some areas where it has to catch up, but we're at that turning point right now.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked about this in the past, but we're already, the end of the gas engine has been here for a while. If you look at horrible compromises like the CVT, which I cannot stand, cars that have the continually variable transmission. It's this rubber band transmission that just doesn't give you any kind of feedback. And superchargers and turbochargers, all in the interest of like smaller and smaller displacement, which when you're not flooring it, there's less fuel and air mixture and it'll get better economy. And when you need it, you floor it and all that boost. But the reality is all those cars don't get very good fuel economy. So historically, my dream has always been, I want a car that I can just cruise on the freeway and get like 50 miles a gallon. And then when I want to, I can floor it and have a race car. Was not possible. And now I literally have that in my garage.
Yeah.
I have a car that can go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, and all the rest of the time costs less than a Toyota Prius.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible.
No kidding.
Which actually takes us to the next story, which is actually the beginning of kind of a series of stories, which you'll start to see a thread with what we're about to talk about. So this one is Elon Musk getting the Robinhood CEO to kind of spill the beans on what happened with the whole GameStop kind of fiasco that happened over the past couple of weeks or about a month. And I got to call out Gally from Hyperchange. If you haven't seen his videos where he's talked about the GameStop stuff and the Robinhood kind of fiasco, I highly recommend going to watch his videos. He does a wonderful breakdown of Robinhood is you are not the customer, you're the product, and the actual customer are the hedge funds that are kind of funding behind the scenes. So it's an interesting take on when you understand that the whole story about GameStop and what Robinhood did kind of starts to make more sense. But what's fascinating about this specific story is that Elon Musk went on the new social media platform called Clubhouse, which is basically just kind of like real-time podcasting or radio shows. It's just kind of like impromptu little rooms that people can jump into, and you can kind of have a audio chat in real time and bring people on stage and ask questions. It's really, really, really cool platform. I've been having a lot of fun with it. Elon came on and had one of these rooms and was talking to a bunch of people and answering questions, and they ended up pulling in the CEO of Robinhood, who also happens to be related to the whole Clubhouse thing. So there was probably a back room conversation between all of them, and they probably all know each other and are friends, which is why it happened. But Elon asked some very pointed questions about why the hell did Robinhood stop trading GameStop? And it turned out that Robinhood was their arms were kind of tied because they were suddenly forced to try to raise $3 billion of funding to cover all of these sales, like in the middle of the night. And so they had to suddenly stop allowing people to buy it because they couldn't actually cover it because they had to have $3 billion like immediately. Raises a whole bunch of questions about their liquidity as a company, that if something like this can happen and take them out, do they really have enough funding to be able to do what they're doing? Are they solvent? It raises a whole bunch of questions. And it also then raises the question of who out there was forcing them to suddenly do $3 billion and why? And so there's a whole bunch of hinky activity in the background that's going on. And I just thought it was really fun that Elon was kind of like spearheading this conversation in a very public way. What did you think?
Yeah, exactly. You didn't mention the name of this series, but this whole week, as we were preparing our stories, I kind of felt like Elon Musk is basically the supreme overlord and supreme commander of Earth. His weight is unbelievable at this point. He can come in and just send a message, like a tweet, and change the direction of the Earth's rotation or something. But yeah, so he's on Clubhouse, which now is this huge platform. It's been private. They're not really out of their open beta. But he goes on there and says he's going to be on that Happy Time show on Clubhouse, and suddenly their servers are overloaded with all these people joining and stuff, which we could have probably predicted. But yeah, he's holding Vlad, the CEO of Robinhood, to some kind of account and kind of talking to him about this stuff, which he's the CEO of a car company. What is the connection? But that's kind of the clout he has at this point. Your point, which was very good about Robinhood's customer, comes to mind. But yeah, Elon basically kind of talked for us people. I use Robinhood actually for a small part of what I do, and they had to kind of answer for this. Like, how are you blocking people from buying or selling securities? Which sounds like a kind of crazy thing. We can talk. I have a channel where I've talked about this a little bit other in my channel, but crazy stuff. And at least Elon is there, kind of holding people to account, which I think is cool. But as far as watch Gally's videos. We'll put links or something. But crazy week if you're an investor.
Yeah. Like I said, this is the trend of the next few stories of the power of Elon is essentially what these next few stories are all about. So you want to take the next one?
Yeah. So the next one is Elon shares his optimism for the new U.S. administration. And this, I wanted to cover this one because if I had to categorize Elon's kind of political views, I'd say he's a little bit of a libertarian. I think he kind of believes in kind of a hands-off government approach. So I was happy to hear that he's in favor of the Biden administration. It's interesting because clearly it benefits him and his companies. Like his companies are all kind of in this world, in this space. And so I'm glad to hear that, he's got optimism. And I think this lends itself really well for future investment and stuff. Again, to the point about Elon, the supreme commander of Earth, if he's optimistic about things, I think that carries a lot of weight in terms of like investing capital and where it goes. Does it go into more EV companies? There's a ton of stuff. Like Archimoto is a company that I've been investing in for a while, just blowing up lately. And so there's just a lot of excitement. And I think it's just a positive a window or a preview of the next 4 years.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised in the article it mentioned how in the interview with him, he had said he hasn't reached out to the Biden administration yet. I would have expected him to be like on the phone almost immediately of telling them, you got to do this, this, and this. But it's interesting that he's kind of staying back, seeing how things play out. And I hope he does get in touch with them soon. But he did mention like all the people that the administration is reaching out to hire and bring in. He actually knows a lot of these people. The people at Tesla are very well connected to a lot of these people that are being brought in. So that may be part of the reason why he doesn't feel an urge to reach out right now, because they know all the players that are involved and what's shaking out. One thing I did want to bring up is we've talked about this before where Biden signed that executive order saying, federal cars are going to start buying EVs to replace their fleet. And we speculated, like, wonder if Tesla will be part of that or it's going to be mainly GM and Ford. I had a viewer reach out to me and sent me a link to the actual executive order. And he cited in the executive order, section 205 EV. In that section, one of the requirements is you have to buy from companies that have unions. And Tesla is a non-union company right now. So no Tesla, the way the executive order is currently written.
Wow, that's sneaky.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's going to be all Ford and GM, most likely.
So this is part of why I was surprised and excited is he doesn't have Joe Biden's views or like largely Democratic views. He's an anti-union person and other things that kind of seem like they could potentially be in conflict. So I'm glad that there's some symbiosis and some positivity. I think that'll be a good thing for the entire industry.
Yeah.
Thank you to Gary, by the way, for his super chat. I really appreciate it. He mentions if Elon requires cell fabs to sell cells to non-Tesla customers and if they pay a higher revenue and stuff. I think I wouldn't expect Tesla to sell batteries to anybody else until they're far more mature and they're like building all the cars they need to and they have excess supply. Until then, I think they're keeping everything possible for themselves.
Yeah, I would think the same thing. So next up is this one I just found, I don't know why I find this adorable. I think it's because I think Sandy Munro is just the coolest guy on the planet. I want to like keep him in my pocket. I just think he is the coolest guy. He's so smart. He's so astute in his takes on things and how he's been breaking down all of the Teslas and being very honest about his takes on the problems with it. This conversation, if you haven't seen it, everybody should just go out and watch it. It's like 40 minutes long and it is spectacular. It's a great conversation of watching two engineers basically just kind of geek out and talking to each other. And they go so far down the rabbit holes in certain aspects of the way the cars are built and the way they both think cars should be built. And they actually are very much in alignment on things. Because Sandy Munro has talked numerous times about how he's been trying to get car companies to do this like unibody construction and use these gigantic molds and everything to make cars. And that's exactly what Elon's starting to do. So it's like he is super excited to see a company actually doing something that he's been trying to get people to do for a long time. So it's really, really cool. I thought this was a very fun watch. Strongly recommend it.
I've been watching more Monroe Live lately, and yeah, we'll have to put a link to it. You got to check it out. It's super cool. And like you said, part of why I think I like to hear Elon talk is he really embraces the engineer in him.
Yeah.
I was reading somewhere that like even when he puts down a job title, he puts engineer. That's how much he thinks about it.
Yeah.
So when you hear him talk, you get to hear him think about the things that matter, as opposed to a lot of CEOs who don't care about the nuts and bolts of it. They're like, go build it. I don't care. I'm worried about like how can we increase margins by 8% and ink out a little more sales and stuff. He really cares about the products that he's making, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So next up.
The next one, the supercharger factory.
Yes.
Yes. So Tesla is slated to open up a new supercharger factory in China. So traditionally, they had been making their supercharger stalls in Fremont, California, for the version 2 superchargers. And as they went to the V3 model that has a faster 250 kilowatt architecture, they started building those in the Gigafactory in Albany. And so that's where they've been up until now. This new one is poised to be a really big deal because China is a massive country and a massive customer and a future stronghold for Tesla. And so this will dramatically increase their output of superchargers, because currently they have about 20,000 chargers installed, it says, and this new factory is poised to be pumping out about 10,000 a year. So huge scales of improvement in terms of output. And it should be a welcome side of news for people who have Teslas in congested areas in China and want more charging infrastructure.
Yeah, that to me was the key out of the entire thing of Tesla has about 20,000 superchargers, and we all talk about how they're the most, widely available supercharger network in the world. And it's like, here's a factory that can produce half of that in a single year. It's just,
yeah, no kidding.
It puts into sense the scale of the potential rollout that they'll do. It doesn't mean that they will be doing this right off the gate. They're probably going to have to ramp up to that. And there's got to be a lot of logistics about even installing that many. So who knows how quickly they'll actually be rolling them out. But the fact that the factory can actually pump out that many, it means the supercharger network is going to get a lot more vast, a lot faster. It's going to be like exponential growth for the supercharger network, which is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad it's the V3 stuff. I think their rollout with V3 upgrading from V2 is progressing faster than I thought. When I first got my Model 3, the very first V3 was unveiled in Las Vegas, and we did a little road trip to go check it out. This is before COVID. We had no idea it would be our last, but that was our first one. And now we go to several on our route between here and the Bay Area, and they're rolling out at a quick clip. One of the things that maybe you don't know, the V2 stalls, like if you have two stalls, A and a B, so you have like stall 4A and B, they shared the output. So if you had a car charging on A and you pulled into B and plugged in, you guys would be splitting the potential output, and as a result, your charge rate would be lower. With V3, they go and have a dedicated stream for each stall, so you don't have that issue any longer, and plus the 250 kilowatt speeds. So for people who drive a lot, and there are some, you mentioned Clubhouse, I was on a couple of calls where people were talking about supercharging and kind of geeking out, and there are some people who drive like thousands of miles, even during COVID. Yeah. So this will be welcome news for the people who use it in Asia. And I didn't mention the article if they were going to ship these to like Europe and stuff, but anyways, more capacity, more output is always a good thing.
Exactly. So next up, Panasonic plans to deploy the Tesla 4680 cells into production later this year. And in fact, it said sometime after April 1st is the later this year. So not that far away that they could potentially start producing these or trying to produce these. This story is kind of key because Elon's been saying all along, he got misinterpreted during Battery Day. And when people were understanding that Tesla was going to start manufacturing their own batteries, people initially assumed that Tesla was going to go it alone and start phasing out people like Panasonic and their partners. And Elon's been saying since then, no, we want to double down with all of our partners and bring more people on because we need more and more batteries. This is not about replacing, it's about adding to. And this story is like Elon's not lying, because here it is. It's like, here's Panasonic at Gigafactory, Nevada, is going to be doing this. They're going to be producing this there. So it's like, this is them starting to transition and ramp this whole production up, which just goes to show that later this year, that's probably what's going to be like being used in the new Tesla Model S's that are going to be coming out for the Plaid Plus. It's like, it's going to be coming out of places like this. So it's not necessarily all what Tesla's creating on their own. So this is pretty cool news.
Yeah. this is, I don't think, I didn't think about this. I actually didn't know if this was going to be the case. I kind of thought they would just keep rolling 2170s in Sparks, Nevada Gigafactory and maybe move this. But this is a huge deal. It really just pushes forward timelines on some of the products that they were going to make. So when I saw the Plaid Plus numbers and how they would ship them later in the year, whereas the Model S Plaid is shipping like in a month, I knew this battery was the reason for that. Mm-hmm. And if we're talking about building these in the first Gigafactory, that's huge news. Part of why I think this is really exciting is just their foresight into how they built the Gigafactory. The Gigafactory in Nevada is not fully completed, but what they've done is they've built it in a modular way that as they build on it, each like module is self-sustaining. It can build a battery unit. And then when you have two of them, it can build twice as many. When you build three of them, it can build 3 times as many. It isn't like typical factories are built to be, we have this booth here, we have this over here, we have that over there. It's not easy to just take them. They're not fully contained, I guess I will say. And these are. So imagine if they have these different business units that keep doing 2170s and then 2 new little sub-modules that do the 4680s. They have the infrastructure and how they've built these lines in place to be able to do that. Really exciting. Thank you, Bill O'Barr, for the super chat. He mentions he says, looks like Berlin and Austin may open earlier than projected. What do you think? I think they will. And that's actually a video I was thinking about doing. Let us know in the comments if you, maybe Matt and I should both do it. But about how they build their factories, it's pretty interesting, their approach. They're building at breakneck speeds in a lot of cases. I did some early research, and it looks like 2 years is what a lot of companies are taking to build factories, and Tesla's doing it in less than 1. So cool stuff and really exciting news. I think for anybody who's trying to get a Cybertruck, this is very welcome news, knowing that Panasonic is going to be making these batteries.
And the whole thing about it, Tesla's actually gotten much better at not overselling what they can actually do. They're under-promising and over-delivering now. Elon time where he would be like, oh, we'll have that in 6 months. And then a year later, they finally get it. They finally have learned how to manage expectations. And they're constantly saying, oh, this should be online by this date. And they keep beating those estimates. So they're getting much better at using conservative estimates when they're talking about when these factories will open or when a car will be ready for delivery. I love that. I love seeing them under-promise and over-delivering. So I hope they keep doing it.
That's been their MO since Model 3 timeline hells. The only exception I think of is FSD, which I think is so long running that should we just let's just call that one example of under delivering and move it aside. But everything else they've been doing a good job with.
Yeah. So next up,
first pictures of the Volkswagen ID.6 electric SUV. And for anybody who is looking for this kind of a car, people who are kind of maybe hoping the Model X would be a little bit bigger, this might be your SUV. There's no mention of a third row, which is the first thing I was a little bit bummed out about. But look at the pictures. It looks like a pretty good looking car, very much in keeping with the ID.3 and ID.4, and that's because it'll be built on the MEB platform, just like the others. It looks like maybe the wheelbase will be stretched out behind the rear wheel, maybe a little bit more than the other ones. But yeah, I'm not sure if the wheelbase is actually stretched out, if the platform has that capability or functionality, but that's probably a little more of an overhang off the back. Curious if they're going to, like the timelines and when they'll be built. I'd imagine China, the U.S., North America would be big markets for a car like this. If the ID.4 is going to be a big hit here, I think the ID.6 would be even bigger. So this is a look at what happens when you invest in like a vehicle architecture and you actually are serious about building EVs. The rate at which new models are introduced is pretty rapid. You don't have to go back to the drawing board for the new chassis every single time.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what your take is on the looks, but I'll say I like the Volkswagen look. I don't love it. I love my Tesla. I love the way that my car looks. These aren't offensive designs, but I don't feel that like, wow, I really want to go out and get one kind of a vibe. What do you think?
I'm probably a little more pro on that than you. I do think they're handsome cars. They're not gorgeous cars. But like, inoffensive would be a good way to put it, but I actually think they look pretty nice. And it's like, I think they're going to resonate with a lot of people, where Teslas are gorgeous, but they're also a little more opinionated in their design, which can turn some people off. Like a lot of people don't like that very Spartan interior at all, where the insides of the VW cars, they look like a traditional car inside, just with a lot of screens. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people that just are drawn to that style of car. But they're very modern. They're very, nice. I have no problems with them. I just think they're nice, kind of handsome cars.
That's probably a good way to put it. Yeah. It doesn't feel like they're sabotaging it like I felt BMW did for a long time. Like
Yeah.
BMW went out of their way to make just
The
hideous
ID3,
cars.
the ID3 is an ugly car. I can't stand that car.
The BMW.
Yeah, the BMW.
Yeah. No kidding. i3s. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking, but they're kind of getting their head around it too. But we're now at the point where if you think back to Model 3, honestly, if you talk to your friends, how many of them are ready for an electric car? I would argue maybe 1 in 10 or 15. Now I feel like everybody's ready and they're just waiting for that right model to show up. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are thinking about maybe the Rivian R1S, which is one of my favorite ones. It's like the little electric Range Rover to me. I think I love that one. And now they have this, maybe something bigger from Hyundai and Apple's partnership or something. I mean, in a couple of years, we might have tons and tons of options. And I know you mentioned this, that there's way more in Europe than we have here. But let's hope some of the stuff also they're sandbagging and they get it ahead of time. Maybe this car is ready in a year or two as well.
I think you brought up a really good point with when you have a platform, it means the iteration and rolling them out speeds up as you go. I think that's what we're going to see out of both GM and VW. We're going to see kind of a slow beginning, and then it's going to suddenly ramp up really fast, which is exciting because we need more options on the market.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that kind of wraps up our stories for today. So we can transition over to the Q&A section of the show. We'll start combing through the comments. If you have anything new you want to bring it up now.
I wanted to jump in quickly. Francois mentioned, please discuss anti-EV taxes in some states. We mentioned this, that charge higher registration fees for EVs. We mentioned this last week, I think. I mentioned how lawmakers can drag their feet for what feels like decades to get anything done. But when news broke that there's people driving, God forbid, driving on roads and not paying gasoline taxes, man, they were quick to implement those fees. And in some places, I think West Virginia is one that comes to mind. They can be pretty exorbitant. So I think write to your congresspeople. These early days, depending on what state you live, it's kind of a political thing. Mm-hmm. But the savings are still probably pretty good. California, don't even get me started how much we pay in registration fees and stuff. My Tesla cost me like $800 a year to register. So
I pay excise taxes on my car. Excise tax is based on the value of the car. My Model 3 is worth a lot, so I have to pay a lot in excise tax every year. So I don't feel so guilty about not paying taxes for the roads through the gas anymore, because it's like I'm already paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars every year through excise taxes.
Yeah, if they introduced that in California, I think they'd have a mutiny on their hands. It'd be too much because we already pay it. We pay too much. So
yeah,
we'll see. Thank you, Ryan, for the super chat. We appreciate you. Eric, who I think has been here for every one of our episodes, says, what stream platform do you guys use? So we've got some capture devices from Blackmagic called ATEM, and that feeds into Ecamm, which is the streaming platform that we use. And Matt is hosting on his computer, and I'm a guest, an interviewee, if you will. But for about $20 or $30 a month, is that right for Pro? I already forgot.
It's a little less, I think. I think it's 15.
15?
It's not bad.
About $15 a month.
Yeah.
You could host your own stream and send us a link. We'll join.
It's basically a Mac-specific version of OBS, if any of you have ever heard of OBS, which is an open source streaming platform. It's basically kind of a Mac-specific version of that.
Alejandro Ramirez says, Tesla makes only 4 models but sells more EVs than anyone else on Earth. VW and GM are promising to build 20 plus models each. They plan to sell a but only a few of each. What do you think? What do you think about that, Matt? Tesla's selling, hand over fist, and they only have 3 models, but GM's gonna have 20. How does that play out?
If you look at the scale of things today, GM and Ford basically make that kind of number of cars today. They way outsell Tesla. Tesla is still a small player in the broad market. So to say that they're going to be making 20 to 30 EVs, that's because they're transitioning away from gas. They're going to have that many options when they're done. They're looking at it, it's probably selling as many cars then as they are now. They just have to transition everything over to EV. I think Tesla, on the other hand, probably needs more models to be able to hit every part of the market. I don't know if they're going to end up being, actually they could end up being like Apple in a lot of ways, because Apple actually does not, they sell the most, the highest number of sales of a phone, but in the grand market, they're still just a small player. When you talk about like all of the Android devices combined are just huge compared to Apple. But when you're talking about like a specific Samsung phone versus an iPhone, the iPhone crushes it. So I think it's going to be something like that with Tesla. Like individual make, I think Tesla's going to be one of the best sellers that's out there. But as far as the sheer volume that they're selling, I don't know if they'll ever quite match a GM or a VW unless they really ramp up the number of models that they offer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think you're right. I was just thinking about that. Yeah, the Apple analogy is good. They have the iPhone Mini, the iPhone Large. They have like 4 models or so, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you have some of these companies, like, have you ever like tried to buy a printer? Or there's some products that are like a refrigerator. Why does LG have 800 models of refrigerator? It's like it's just bizarre. But the thinking is that they sell more, but there's more like supply chain issues and logistical issues and stuff. I think Apple and Tesla might give people a better idea of how the future might look. Like instead of investing, BMW, for example, used to make like the 3 Series, the 5 Series, and 7 Series. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Clean lineup. Then they made SUVs. And then it was, let's call the coupes 4 Series. But then let's make a 4-door coupe profile 4 Series called the Grand. It's just bizarre. BMW is completely lost in the sauce. Like I used to be a big fan when I was younger. Can't stand their stuff anymore. They're just lost and they're kind of waffling. I think one of the things that people does when they're struggling is they just go try a new one, go make a new model.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to your point, there are needs. By the way, in my recent videos, I'm getting a lot of comments, and somebody else mentioned it too up here. But a minivan, Tesla's not going to build a minivan, is my prediction,
exactly.
Because it's just not like it's not the premier place that they want to be. But people want that. I know they do. Having kids, I'll tell you, whoever builds the first really great 300-mile range minivan EV, they're going to have a special market carved out for them. But
right.
Interesting.
Other companies basically throw as much as the walls they can to see what sticks, where Apple is very selective in what they do. It's like, I think that's what's going to be Tesla. Tesla's very selective, and what they do make are going to be hot sellers, but they're going to be at a different scale than a GM or a Ford, but they're going to dominate the revenue in comparison.
Right.
Just because they're so selective and smart in how they approach their product lineup.
Yeah, that's very true. Cybervan. Yeah, that'd be a good seller, I think. So a couple of people mentioned CPUs, computer chip shortages, as being a bigger problem than batteries.
Right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think just generally everything, there's a shortage of everything when you talk about shutting down factories and all the COVID. COVID has just pretty much made everything difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing, too, is a lot of people don't fabricate their own chips. Like Apple doesn't. I covered all this in my Apple video that I made about the Apple car. But the M1 is designed by Apple, but manufactured, the fabrication is all done by TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor company. And so one of the really only companies that manufactures them is Intel. Even AMD outsources the manufacture of their chips. So I think what I think COVID will teach people is maybe you want to outsource less and maybe do more at home, because otherwise you're going to have flux like this where you can't predict shortcomings when people how to shut down plants and stuff.
It kind of ties back to what Tesla's doing with batteries. They're starting to do batteries on their own, but they still have Panasonic. They're going to have LG. They're going to have all these different companies partnered with them. It diversifies where they're manufacturing it, but because they're doing it on their own as well, it hopefully should alleviate those pinch points.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Eric, for the super chat. We appreciate you. Eric is, you're awesome. Your support is very appreciated.
James Paul mentioned, hope Tesla releases the CCS adapter soon. There are some third-party options already. I agree, but I've also seen a bunch of reports of those third-party options not working. Like, they cost hundreds of dollars, and I've seen videos of people who can't get them to work. So I don't know what secret sauce is going on with the Tesla and the connectors, but some of these companies seem to be struggling to figure out how to get it to work right. So I'd be wary of third-party stuff right now.
Good call. And it's not cheap. I'm not sure exactly what makes some adapters affordable and some not. It must just be the amount of converting and inverting and or whatever it is. But that one is not cheap.
Yeah.
It's maybe wait. Yeah. Gary Itano says, has Lucid ever acknowledged a robo-taxi future? Do they have a credible full self-driving package in the works? I will say, if you think about, and the two don't really have to be married, but EVs and full self-driving have gone hand in hand. There's no reason for that. You could be a hardcore full self-driving engineering innovative company running on gasoline cars. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But typically whenever like a new foundational change like this happens, people rethink what's possible. And suddenly, let's start with EVs and then full self-driving. So they've been married, but they don't really have to be. That being said, companies like Apple, I think, they don't really care about building cars. Apple doesn't really make anything. They outsource manufacturing. So for me, they're more into the full self-driving part of it. Lucid is more about the car. I think their goal is, let's get 100,000 cars a year out of our factories, and then we'll roll in and invest more in full self-driving. They are a car company. Like Lucid to me is a car company, and they're investing in the factory in accordance to that. So I would say that if you're really hardcore about FSD, you're probably going to be better served with Tesla right now. If you're looking for a great car, and by supporting a company that will then take that money to R&D and research FSD, that might be the way to think about Lucid.
Yeah. Seeing a ton of comments about Rivian SUV, can't wait. R1S. It's like Rivian has a similar buzz around it as Tesla from everything I've seen. It's really cool to see another company really kind of get inroads and becoming very popular. It's also really cool. We didn't talk about it, but the first Amazon Rivian powered delivery vans are now on the street in testing, and I think it's in Los Angeles. It's that to me, I didn't expect it this soon. So it's like it's rolling out much faster than I was expecting. It's also really exciting for a company that they have a commercial vehicle that's starting to hit the streets before their non-commercial vehicle that everybody's super excited about. So this is going to basically be giving them a good baseline of revenue coming in from Amazon to build on top of for the consumer products. Really cool.
Yeah, some of these companies, to me, their problem is just building them fast enough. Tesla has that problem, and I think Rivian's right there too, because they're gonna have to scale up the production for the vans and stuff for Amazon. But they're already in testing, which is really good. That's another one of those things you should look for in companies. You know, Rivian, The Long Way Up, we mentioned that documentary series. They're deeply invested in testing. Lucid is the same way. They've done laps in places. They have tons of test mules out collecting data and stuff. So you should really be looking at how companies are doing, because once you get the final green light, like everything here is good, that only then can you really start making a factory and producing them. Otherwise, what happens if some part you thought was strong enough isn't? Then you got to change it all out. The cost of doing like retooling is exorbitant. So testing is key.
Yep. Oh, Eric asked, Matt, how did the Ego snowblower work in the most recent storm? We got over 1.5 feet of snow. It was probably about 20 inches, actually closer to 20. And the end of my driveway gets plowed in, and there was about 3.5 feet of snow at the end that was like chunks of ice and packed snow at the end. And the snow was heavier than the video I made. So this was like an amazing test for it. It did an amazing job. I had to stop about 2/3 of the way through because I just ran out of juice with all the batteries I had that I could put in it. So I did have to pause for 45 minutes to let the big batteries charge back up again, and then I was able to finish the whole thing out. But it was an exceptional snowblower. It handled the end of the driveway better than any gasoline snowblower I've ever had at the end of this driveway. So I'm very impressed with it.
Very cool. That is the one ego tool I'm not going to be shopping for, but I'm glad to hear that it's that good.
Your neighbors would talk if they probably saw you go out there with us. That's 2-stage snowblower.
But I had a contest with my neighbor about the Ego chainsaw. I forget the number of inches, but anyway, it's a medium size, kind of not made for like lumberjacks who cut trees all day, but a consumer grade chainsaw. And I had a contest. My neighbor says, if it's not still, then it's not or steel. I don't know how it's pronounced. That's a German brand. It's not a chainsaw. So we had a contest. We had this tree, and we had cut through it 2 different times. I floored him. Like, it wasn't even close. And we both had, sharpened blades and stuff. These things are crazy. There's this notion that electric motors are not as strong as gasoline. Not true at all.
Yeah.
And it's a high time that we show people that.
Like my old snowblower, the Ariens snowblower, at the end of the driveway, it'd be throwing snow maybe 10, 15 feet through the air, which is just enough to get it off the driveway. This thing, I'm at the end of the driveway, it's hurling snow 30 feet through the air. It was going so far into my neighbor's yard, I had to re-angle things because I was throwing it way too far. It had no problems whatsoever.
Bill says, Ricky, how do you handle the snow then? I was like, nah, yeah, where I live, that is not a problem. It was 68 degrees today.
I will say one thing about snow with people who have solar panels. The avalanche of snow that you get is actually terrifying. It's like you have 1.5 feet of snow on your roof. It very quickly after a day will just all at once slide off the roof. You're talking about tons of snow at once just flying off the roof. I'm sitting in here in my office. Suddenly there's this rumble. It feels like an earthquake, and then just an avalanche of snow outside my window crashing onto the ground. And I kept thinking what if I was out there with my dog right when that happened?
Right. Is it more likely with solar or just generally, even off your roof, right? Or
it typically doesn't happen with just regular roofs because it sticks. But the solar panels, because there's that gap, it allows the bottom of the snow to kind of melt to create a slickness, and then just slides right off the glass.
Oh, wow.
So you get the snow coming off your roof like you typically don't if you don't have solar panels. So it's a pro and a con to having solar panels in a colder climate with snow.
So, yeah, I'm not going to top you there in terms of snow, but we had hail. It was like a 58-degree day, not even cold, and we had hail, like proper hail.
Wow.
Landon. Nothing too big, but still, just crazy weather lately. It's been bizarre. James Paul says, do you think the Roadster will have carbon fiber body? Sandy discussed the benefits with Elon, but Elon seemed non-committal. I don't think they're possibly not that far along at this point because they've got these new kind of full one-piece casting machines that they're revolutionizing with the Model Y and the Cybertruck. The Cybertruck has a stainless steel kind of an exoskeleton. I think they're at this point where they're figuring out the best way to go, and I don't think they'd be opposed to it. But no one's really made carbon fiber easy yet. So I think it'll be a question of engineering performance and ease of manufacturing. I think Elon really loves the manufacturing part of it. So I'm sure it'll be the heart of what he figures.
Ian has an interesting question. I'm curious to see what your take is. What do you think the most underrated renewable technology is?
Wow.
Yeah. Have to think about
that. That is a good question.
It's a really good question.
I don't think people think much about geothermal. Geothermal is actually a pretty potent energy source, and it is I mean, it's renewable until the core of the Earth cools, which will happen in 4 billion years or something like that. But that one's pretty big. It doesn't help everyone everywhere, so that's why I think it doesn't get more respect. But like these geothermal plants put out a lot of electricity. Maybe that's my vote. What do you think? What's your?
It's funny that you bring that up because my next video is about geothermal.
You've been killing it lately. Honestly, if you guys want to like a little science education, like what it feels to go to like engineering university, just watch Matt's channel. He covers every aspect of it. The mechanical battery storage, the flywheel. If you guys haven't watched that video that he's done, you gotta check that one out. That one was fantastic, and I'm glad to see a lot of people watched it. Like 500,000 of you guys watched it. So
that video caught on. I don't think geothermal is the most underrated. I personally think it's energy storage techniques like liquid air energy storage, like cryo air energy storage, those kind of things. There's something about it. It's like it's using all the technologies that exist with natural gas. So you're taking all that expertise. You could take people's jobs for people who build this equipment, do natural gas plants, and just transfer them one-to-one over to liquid air energy storage systems. And they're very good. So it's like you can job transfer, energy storage. It's kind of a win-win in my book, which is kind of why I think it's kind of underrated.
Yeah, good call. It'll especially factor larger in the future, for sure.
Yeah. Are you guys disappointed? No, this is Michael. Are you guys disappointed in The Boring Company? I am.
Yeah.
That's what he wrote. I am. I'm not. I still think jury's still out on it because I don't think they really have kind of done their thing yet. They're still kind of experimenting. But what they're doing around Las Vegas, and they're building more and more tunnels, and there's more cities that are interested in having them do that in their cities. Like I said, we're not seeing it in full force, especially with the pandemic. It's like even after they build all this stuff, it's like people aren't flying to Las Vegas right now. So it's like we kind of have to wait and see once this stuff is built out. You have the automated cars running in the tunnels, and it's like the fully operational Death Star is in effect. It's like I don't think we can really judge it until that point. But it's probably going to be another year or two, I would assume, before we can really start to see this stuff in action.
Yeah, there's so much in the way of like modeling or speculation required here. How does, like in 10 years from now, I want to go visit Matt 3,000 miles away. How am I getting there? Am I flying? Am I taking some Hyperloop at 1,000 miles an hour underground between East and West Coast? There's a lot of projections and predicting. And that is one I don't feel good about predicting yet because I'm not really sure. Like the electric vehicle thing, you and I, we've been on this for years, like a long time ago when I saw the writing on the wall. Other things like the self-driving car, bringing the cost per mile of transportation around lower than like a bus. These are things that I think are easier to understand and get my head around. But as far as the Boring Company, that is a speculative thing that I don't know. I'm not sure what 10 years will hold.
Well, I think Elon's play on words with the name of the company. It's a funny joke, but it's also serious. It's not something we should be excited about. It's a boring company. It's like it's kind of a mundane thing that it's doing. It's not a showy thing that they're doing. But I think the jury's still out. Same thing with the Hyperloop. Hyperloop, to me, there's something about it that's really cool. It's like if it can pan out, I can see a potential benefit. But who knows if the cost analysis benefit between, like, is it going to be worth it? It's like neat technology, but the cost may be so expensive it may not make it worthwhile. So there's a lot to be left for there.
Yeah. Well said. Actually, that's really well said. The engineer in me loves what Elon does, and I think about this all the time. If I had just $1 bajillion, I would hire teams to go answer every crazy, quirky question I have. Like, that's what Elon has pretty much done. Yep. Okay, going to space is really hard. Why? Well, it's expensive. It's $40,000 per kilometer. Okay, what can we do about that? How can we get that down 10x or 100x? And he just sets out to like go solve that problem and like kind of reverse engineer it. What if you reuse a rocket? What if you do a million things differently? What if you can, cut these costs down here? And so he's shown you what SpaceX can do. He's brought down the fact that the cost of flight like over 20x, I think it was, for like a kilogram of payload to space. Boring Company is kind of like that as well, right? He's saying, okay, we don't have tunnels everywhere yet, right? Why not? It's expensive per mile. Per mile of tunneling at this depth is this much money. And he says, what if we could cut that by a factor of 10? Would you build tunnels then? And he's just kind of running experiments. And I think the knowledge of it, like the end result of all of his companies, even if like SpaceX works out, Tesla works out, Boring doesn't, I think the end result will really push us forward. It'll help us understand where we should be looking for transportation in the future. Is it underground? Is it electric planes? Is it nuclear planes? I mean, who knows, right? That's kind of the fun of it.
I think the thing that I think Elon's legacy is most likely going to be first principles thinking. Just how every single one of his companies challenges the norms on everything. It's just, that to me is just, it's Steve Jobs, built this amazing company in Apple and created, they figured the secret sauce of how to make a product that people just covet and just want to have. Elon's motivations are completely different, but his approach to it is just so, why haven't we been doing this all along? Like, it's just one of those, why aren't we always kind of questioning the norms? Why are we doing this? Why don't we do it a different way? We're wasting so much time, effort, and energy doing it this way. We could do it this way and it'd be so much faster and easier and cheaper and more effective. That's what I love about every single one of his companies, from SpaceX to the Boring Company to everything. It's to me, that's his biggest mark he's going to leave.
Yeah, just as you were saying that, James Paul says first principles needs to be basic training for young engineers and designers, and I couldn't agree more. You're completely right. It's a funny way of looking at problems. If your goal is I want to buy a house in 1 year, then suddenly you can kind of back solve and say I need that much capital. I mean that much down payment. What choices do I have to make? What is it reality? It kind of is a fun way of looking at life, and me and my wife have been doing more of that, but. First principles is a really fascinating take, and it applies to a lot of aspects of your life. It could be, it doesn't have to be as revolutionary as like space travel. It's a fun way of solving problems and kind of back solving based on what the problems currently are and how rethinking those problems can change the outcome.
What year do you
Here's a good question.
Okay, go ahead. You go ahead.
I think you read it. Go ahead.
Eric Williams, what year do you predict that EV car sales cross over and pass gas car sales? What's your take?
I was looking at.
Yeah, okay.
Good. Yeah, that is a great question. I've always been really aggressive on this number. Probably, I think it'll happen like 2028. I think the scale of growth is going to be so big, and I think what'll happen is it'll just be ridiculous to buy a gas car. No one will want it. It'll be impossible to like keep up with or like get it filled. The bottom and the used market will be gone because they're going to get banned, and you're not going to be the bottom's going to fall out of it pretty much, and that's where things just really hockey stick. I think. What about you?
That seems very aggressive to me, but at the same time, I could totally see it happening because it's exponential growth in the market, but it's also exponential growth in all of the components that are used to make these things and make them better and cheaper, because there wasn't a ton of investment in lithium-ion batteries to make them super much better because there wasn't enough demand. But as more products used it, increases demand. It's like, here come EVs, which are going to be using even more batteries. We're seeing so much investment in battery technologies right now. It's just off the chain how many companies are out there doing everything from solid state, silicon, you name it. There's billions of dollars being funneled into research of making kick-ass batteries. And some of these are coming out next year. Like Tesla's working on theirs, which is going to be starting to production this year. So it's like, there's going to be this ramp over the next 5 years in just battery technology and charging technologies that's going to shift things dramatically for a lot of people when they see, oh, I can charge my car in 10 minutes or 15 minutes and my car can go 600 miles. I think that is going to change a lot of consumer demand, which is, once again, it's like a snaking in so tails. It's like or snowball going downhill. It's going to get faster and faster and bigger, where I like the way you picked 2028 specifically. My thing would have been before 2030. I don't think we're going to have to wait till 2030, because there's been predictions by analysts that have said 2035 or 2030. It's like, I think it's going to be before what most people are predicting, but it's definitely not in the next 5 years. It's somewhere between the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's the later half of this decade.
Yeah, I think battery supply and battery manufacturer are going to go through the roof. They already are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, GM's talking about building their own, and Tesla is. There's new there's new factories being built by old companies like LG in Indonesia, which we've covered. Yeah, it's going to be crazy. And as people get a chance to drive them and live with them, you're not going back. Like I'm not looking at gas SUVs anymore, even though there's not really an EV choice that I think would fit our life perfectly. But I'm just going to wait until there is. I'm not going to go buy an Escalade or something. James Paul says Ricky doesn't understand the rolling snowball reference, Matt. Fun fact: I'm gonna go off on a limb and say I grew up with more snow than you did. I grew up in Lake Tahoe, and we got there's only a few places in America that get more snow than Lake Tahoe does. We were at kind of the 7,000 feet in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and I grew up shoveling snow. I had my fill, and I moved away from it. But
how much snow are we talking?
I get it.
How much snow are we talking?
We had days like we'd get like 8 feet in a day or something, and you'd have to shovel the driveway like 4 different times during the day to make sure that you didn't get completely snowed in. And we had snow. I'll pull up the numbers. We'll share with you after, and I'll leave a comment.
Because I grew up in upstate New York in Rochester, and the Buffalo Rochester area gets a ton of snow. Not that much snow, but like getting 3 feet was not unheard of in Rochester.
All right, you feel the next one. I'll pull this up.
Let's see.
All right, I got the answer. Yearly snow in Rochester, New York, 77 inches. Okay,
Yep.
You ready for this? Yearly snow in South Lake Tahoe, 215.
My God.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. I'd have to shovel my driveway 5 times to keep it like reasonable, and we didn't have a snowblower back then, but I wish I did.
Oh, that sounds like a horror show.
Yeah. So Christian Richard says, what do y'all think about the governor of Texas signing an executive order to fight Biden's administration on climate change and renewable green energy versus oil and gas? I should have probably put this on the board. We probably would have had time for it. But I read an article about this, and what's funny is they're already leading the way. So talk about being like out of touch with like your constituents. But in the article I was reading is like Texas is number 1 in terms of like wind energy or something. Mm-hmm. So this joker is like actively out to undo what his state is already known for. This isn't even a controversy. This isn't like a future thing. They're already doing it. So like go find something else to do with your whatever it is you do all day, because like without anything from you, they're doing it already. So I thought it was kind of funny, but I don't think very much of that gentleman. Let's put it that way.
I think we're winding down here. We're about to. I think it's time to go. Anything else you want to kind of
flies by?
Yeah. Anything you want to add?
No. I think just talk about the podcast and everything else.
Yeah. Well, basically, just thanks so much for watching and listening. And if you think we've earned it, be sure to subscribe and watch us every Thursday night. We broadcast live at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Or listen on the go by subscribing to the podcast at viceversa.show. And it would also be really helpful if you could give the podcast a rating and review on the podcast platform of your choice, because it really does help. Thanks again to everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.